And we are back, ladies and gentlemen, and we've got some good news. 2.5 years ago, when the ClimateGate emails came out, the known wanton fraud in them, that they were hiding the decline in temperature in the last 15 years, I likened it to the Imperial Death Star being blown up by Luke Skywalker. But there's still an Imperial fleet. But something has happened with the corny Star Wars analogies. I liken this to the Emperor being thrown down the reactor shaft. This is a big deal, and it's breaking here. It just broke in the last few minutes at climatedepot.com. And Marc Morano joins us. I had him on about, in fact, guys, will you print me the article from last week? I forgot, where the Forbes writer says burn down people's houses or take their property if they don't pay Al Gore all the money. I was going to get him on about that article, and then they're announcing giant spy satellites to track our individual carbon footprints and come after us, and they're announcing they're going to shut down part of national parks because humans are invasive. I wanted to get him on about that and the Agenda 21 using bailout money to ship the Cadillac production to China. Oh, they're not just going to China. Bailout money did it. I was going to cover the America-hating, free market-hating agenda. But then, right as we are about to get him on, climatedepot.com, alert, Gaia scientist James Lovelock reverses himself. This is big. This is rats leaving the sinking ship of Man-Bear-Pig. And joining us is Marc Morano, that Newsweek magazine called the king of skeptics. Wow, it's good to be skeptical. The king of not believing known liars. They did a cover story in Rolling Stone. They called him one of the leaders of the climate killers. He needs to be arrested. He's very evil. He, of course, has advised Congress, Senator Inhofe, and along with Lord Monk is probably, you know, the twin dynamic duo of exposing the socialist globalist move to take over the planet through their fake environmental movement. I mean, this is so big. That's why this issue is so big. It's the whole world government agenda. And as Lord Monckton has pointed out, it distracts us from real environmental issues like overfishing, toxic waste dumping. None of us want to hurt the earth. No, it distracts us with pay your pittance, pay your indulgences to get out of purgatory to Al Gore, who, you know, owns part of the carbon exchange. Marc Morano here. I feel like I should have champagne right now, like I did on air a few years ago when the climate stuff came out. Day one, I popped champagne. We ran the media blockade. We got it out. Do you agree with me that this is the Emperor down the mine shaft, or is this just Darth Vader grabbing the Emperor, preparing to throw him down?
A lot of Star Wars analogies. Yeah, I mean, this is equivalent to, yeah, them blowing up the Death Star. This is it. Or the equivalent of Jim Jones bailing out of the People's Temple cult before he drank the Kool-Aid, before they drank the Kool-Aid. He's trying to save the other cultists. James Lovelock today, and making this announcement, and this is broken. This is amazing. One of the key founders of Climate Alarm, James Lovelock, the inventor of the Gaia Earth theory, that the Earth is a living, breathing organism, which has spawned so many Earth worshippers since then, has come out and announced that he was wrong about global warming. He was alarmist about global warming. He now admits that he didn't understand the climate. They thought they knew it 20 years ago. This is huge. And the fact that MSNBC is breaking the news. Now, Climate Depot, we've been following this guy for years. We actually go back to 2010 and show the beginnings of his growing skepticism. He started praising skeptics. He started backing away then. But now his new book's coming out, and apparently in James Lovelock's new book, he completely walks away. This guy made Al Gore look moderate. That's how serious he was. In fact, James Lovelock, as recently as 2007, had said that global warming would doom us all, and, quote, billions of us will die. There'll be a few breeding pairs of people that will survive in the Arctic, unquote. That's how alarmist this guy was. He is now bailing on the movement. He's making a mockery of it. He's saying that he's admitting he's wrong, and he's saying how so few scientists are willing to do it. So in a way, we should really be praising this guy for having the courage to admit his failure.
Why are they beginning to bail the sinking ship? I mean, why are they beginning to climb out of it?
A couple different reasons. One of the UN top scientists a few years ago now warned of coming global cooling on the Earth. And he's of the possibility of global cooling. And this was a man who said that the oceans weren't showing the warming. And this went on, and this caused such a stir. It was at a UN meeting in Europe that this happened. And this may be one of the little peeks into what's going on here. They're fearful that the sun is going to take a downturn, that ocean cycles are going to shift, and that we may be going through several decades. There have been several peer-reviewed studies predicting this, and they're trying to bail out now before they have egg all over their face as global temperatures fail to warm. And what they're already doing, we've already caught what people are openly calling fraud at NASA with James Hansen, and fraud at the University of East Anglia that keeps the temperature data for the United Nations. They're now retroactively changing past temperatures to make recent years warmer than the past. Again, this would be like a Wall Street firm changing their books from 10 years ago to lower their profits to show that profits are going up when in fact they're declining. So what they're doing is they're changing the historic record so they can say, hey, look, things are actually warming now, when before they showed cooling. So that could be what's happening, and they can only adjust temperatures so much. They can only tinker with the data so much and get away with that. So now what we're seeing is people bailing, and we've seen this before. We've talked about it. A man named Dennis Rancourt in Canada, a left-winger who's come out and said, you know, global warming is nothing but a fantasy of the wealthy Western middle class. And he now says that it's taking away from real environmentalism. So many environmentalists are angry and upset that this movement fell flat. And for James Lovelock, the king of the entire movement, this is the man. This was the man who basically, you could say, they call him the father of the modern green movement. Became big in the 1960s, has such followers, and was the original alarmist on global warming. He is now bailing out, and this is huge. And again, for MSNBC to be the one reporting it, there's some irony here. The founders of the movement bail out, and it's reported by the media that helped create it.
But here's the problem. You foreshadowed this a few months ago when you were in South Africa on my show via Skype with Lord Monkton. You said, look out, I predict they're going to fully bail on this, and Al Gore, because you could see the signs, and jump to species extinction and just power grab everywhere. I mean, if they've turned off most of the water to Oregon and northern and central California over a fish that isn't even indigenous, my God, I mean, here in Austin, they steal property for warblers and for salamanders. It's all made up. So, I mean, look out. They're in the lifeboats. Where are they going in the escape pods?
Yes, and you're excellent point, Alex. I don't want to mislead anyone by implying that they're giving up on wacky environmentalism. I haven't seen James Lovelock's new book, but it's what's happening here is many environmental scientists are bailing on global warming. They're going to roll global warming into the larger issue of sustainable development. Coming up, Earth Summit in Rio, which I'll actually be attending with Lord Monkton, and Senator James Inhofe from Oklahoma may be attending as well. So we're going to have some fun down at this Rio conference at the UN, and because it's going to be a new festival where they're going to be introducing species extinction. They're going to be talking about sustainable development, land use policies. Again, they're talking about a scope that can control every aspect of human endeavors, from agriculture to transportation to any kind of land use issue to species and
let's be clear. Let's be clear. Let me just interrupt. I want you to go back. Last year, as you know, they had massive fines for grass dust on a farm. If a barn was dusty, that's it. You're going to be shut down. And Congress is having to act. I mean, this is about a total shutdown. They mean business. If you're not with the in crowd, you're going to have your business or farm shut down. I mean, these are vicious authoritarians.
Yes, and this is what they're looking to have, a international monitoring agency. One of the other stories at Climate Depot today is about the CarbonSat surveillance satellite. It aims to hunt down climate violators globally in just 5 years' time. And we've had the German climate advisor recently come out and say that we need a CO2 budget for every man, woman, and child on the planet. And guess what? Every single American's already over the budget, so we're going to be punished. We're going to be stripped of our ability to emit carbon emissions. And they're coming after it. This is bean counters gone crazy. We saw this in the 20th century. You can put any face you want on it from all the different tyrannical rules, but this is what we're talking about. He who controls carbon controls life. He who controls land use controls life. He who controls our environment controls life. At the same time, Alex, just last week, Gallup released another poll after the latest figures are hundreds of billions of dollars spent promoting man-made climate fears. We are looking at people still put global warming at the bottom. Americans put global warming at the bottom of environmental concerns. And that's good news. And they realize that. People like James Lovelock see a movement dying. Among environmental issues, global warming dead last, according to the latest Gallup data. That is huge. All the hype,
exactly,
all the money, all the Oscars, all the Nobel Prizes, and they can't even get people to be convinced it's an important environmental problem.
Well, it is a big victory. They're regrouping with new scams and new things to scare us with, to, you know, so we can pay them money and worship them as our Gaia gods. But at the same time, if their entire priesthood of this new religion is discredited, and of course, in the background, it's an anti-human religion of eugenics, then where are their new leaders going to be? When they've already been caught crying wolf, it's going to be an ice age by 2000. And then by the 80s, it's going to be melting ice caps.
They do that without. They do that. They turn on a dime. They could care less about that. We had people like Stephen Snyder warn of coming global ice age in the 70s without a problem. By the late 80s, he's warning of global warming and record heat. They have no shame when it comes to that. The one thing they've learned, and this is someone like Paul Ehrlich, the eugenicist, the Mr. Overpopulation fears, he was making predictions in 1970 of 10 years away, 15 years away. The problem was he was still alive. He's still alive today, but he was still alive when he made these predictions. So what the global warming alarmists are doing, and I'm assuming what the new Sustainable Development Earth Summit is going to do, they're going to make predictions much further into the future when everyone who's making the predictions will be long dead. So they have a learning curve. They're getting that part. But they have no shame, whether they're worried about overpopulation, deforestation, global cooling, global warming. They don't care. They turn on a dime. They act as though it never happened. And then they come out with studies. They'll now tell you with a straight face that they never predicted global cooling in the 70s. There's probably some who will claim the overpopulation fears were overblown, despite the fact we have the quotes. We have the quotes from the first Earth Day at Climate Depot. I posted these. They are the most absurd, laughable, asinine quotes. Yet the people making these quotes, people like Paul Ehrlich, are still winning awards today. So they have no shame when it comes to being wrong, to being alarmist. They just shift and go on to the next thing, and the compliant media reports it as though it's all new and shocking information. They never report their track record.
Now, Mark, let me raise this point to you. What's going to happen to James Lovelock with those rats that are not leaving the sinking ship? I want to raise this point. Last week we wrote a story directly linking to the Forbes article that had been out for a couple days, and I guess nobody seemed to think it was a problem. To have Forbes, which does some pretty good writing sometimes, is very respected. That's what makes it even more dangerous. Climate alarmist calls for burning down skeptics' homes. He said, you know, let's find out where they live, quote, let's make them pay, and when their houses are burning, let's not put them out. Let's take their property. I mean, he's pretty much saying burn them down, and Forbes is putting this out like it's normal. This makes the new Black Panther Party saying, let's start killing some white people sound tame. I mean, this is so wild and so desperate. And then we added to it the cornucopia of them saying, we need green fascism. We need to arrest these people. We need to lock them up. I mean,
yeah, Lovelock himself called for suspending democracy to deal with global warming. I think it's one of the things he had called for in the past. I mean, that's their first impulse. We have Tom Friedman in the New York Times praising the Chinese political system because they don't have the messiness of democracy. They can do what's right for the people. They're openly admitting they don't like democracy and the free will of the people. Because why? Because in their minds, the masses, the unwashed masses, get in the way of their Harvard-educated PhD minds that are so intelligent and know so well what is best for the people. How dare the mom of 3 kids living in Iowa has a voice in how they're going to manage this economy. I have 2 masters, a PhD. This is what the people from the New York Times and these other people think. It becomes a elitism that comes over.
Pay Al Gore money or the earth is destroyed. We're saving you, damn it.
That's right. And they really believe they are. And you keep talking about religion and a cult. The Washington Post hosted an Earth Day article yesterday, and I will give you a quote from it. Quote, they called it Earth Day theology. This is the Washington Post newspaper. And it said, quote, God is judging our sins against the planet, and she is very, very angry about it, unquote. They actually are openly putting God into it, and yet they're the ones who come after the religious right, if you will, and make all sorts of accusations. It's the left that has turned and transformed into many of these predictions into what you could only be described as cult-like.
And they're making themselves, they're making themselves the center of the religion. Now remember Carrie Norgard, the professor who said, treat people who don't believe in it. We have all these other professors saying treat us, medicate us. They then said, oh, she didn't write that. It was a mistake. They memory hold it. Then we found a university she was at 3 years ago before they expunged it. And unfortunately, this next report didn't get as much traction as our first that went viral everywhere at Drudge Report and other places. We found one where she wrote a letter to the president saying, oh, get rid of freedom, get rid of democracy. Please don't do what the people want. They're too stupid. And this was a letter by her to him on her website.
Yeah.
So I mean, obviously she meant, you know, treat us, medicate us. I mean, the deception of these people and the fact that they're so arrogant.
Yeah, and also Department of Homeland Security in a new February 2012 report reiterating its call for the Department of Homeland Security Environmental Justice Units. And they're going to be empowered to oversee regulations with local government to go after, in 11 federal agencies, they're going to be going after environmental crimes. So we are not very far. And again, this is all for the good of the planet.
And by the way, Homeland Security, TSA's involved, undercover people, bag searches for the earth. And I mean, imagine the hell of the feds turned loose in everybody's backyard. This is a nightmare.
Yeah, and not only that, but the EPA. Lisa Jackson was recently over in Europe praising the upcoming Earth Summit and talking what she's calling environmental governance. Other people use the phrases like global governance, Al Gore's phrase. And this is what they're seeking. They're basically saying the Earth can't handle it. People are too stupid. Democracy is destroying the planet. We, the enlightened intellectuals, need to lead the unwashed masses. And where have we heard that?
Think about this, though. Everybody that wants to get into the environmental police on record are these acolytes, and it's the majority opinion to imprison us, burn our houses down. This is uniformed people whose leaders talk about burning houses down and arresting Lord Monkton. I've seen some say arrest you, arrest me, all because we know they're full of crap. I mean, these are authoritarian creatures. I mean, I don't know what else to say.
And that's all you can say. And they admit it openly. You know, we have a whole report on all the stuff going back. That people wanting to strangle skeptics in their bed. Talking Points memo talking about executing skeptics. Grist magazine calling for Holocaust-style Nuremberg trials for global warming skeptics. So when someone like the Forbes writer named Steve Zwick mentions that about letting houses burn down and this is the way we can find them, then he says later, well, it's just hyperbolic. I didn't really mean it. Well, no. If it was an isolated incident, someone could get away with that. But as you mentioned, every time we look into this, it follows the same pattern. It's always about stifling dissent, shutting them down. Al Gore, back in 1992, lobbied Ted Koppel not to allow a skeptical scientist on Nightline, Richard Lindzen from MIT, because he said the debate was settled. In 1992, they were trying to silence skeptics before global warming even got off the ground.
Oh, that's another point. They'll never debate. Al Gore won't debate. Cameron won't debate. None of them will debate. That's not a good sign.
In fact, USA Today reported that ClimateGate scientist Michael Mann of the UN, the man who made the totally defrauded hockey stick temperature graph, which showed temperatures stable for 900 years, and then they spike up in the 20th century. It's been totally destroyed scientifically. They say he's out now on a book tour to fight the skeptics and debate them, yet he won't take questions. He won't appear on stage with any skeptic. These people live like paper tigers their entire lives, claiming that they have all the answers, claiming they're not wrong, yet they've never once submitted themselves to that kind of scrutiny or cross-examination. It's an embarrassment. Yeah,
we've invited them all on, and sometimes you get a sniveling response like, I will lower myself to your level. Well, hey, if I'm so low, come on and cream me.
Exactly, and that's what happens is they make all sorts of assertions that can be so easily scientifically refuted using the latest peer-reviewed studies, and they know that. And if they show up, they would be destroyed within a few minutes, and that's the thing. They would never allow it. James Cameron, the Hollywood director, challenged myself and the late Andrew Breitbart and Anne McElhaney from the Irish filmmaker to a debate in Colorado 2 years ago. I was on the plane flying out to Colorado for the debate when at the last minute James Cameron was convinced by his environmental allies to call off the debate because he was likely to not only lose, but lose badly. So this was a man who said he wanted to call out the skeptics in the street like high noon and have a shoot-off, challenged us to a debate. I flew out there, and upon landing in Colorado, find out the debate was canceled by Cameron. That is he went from being king of the king was the stupid phrase in the movie, king of the ocean to chicken of the sea.
Hey, let me stop you. Let me stop you. Again, said he wanted to call people out and shoot them. Their entire
imagery.
Yeah, their entire nomenclature, they're the ones that are always about violence and arrest and let's grab them and treat them. Oh, I didn't mean that, but our other letter, suspend freedom, do whatever you want, dictatorship. I mean, it is a frothing group of miscreant, power-grabbing creatures who've got to be met head-on. And I'm sick of them. Every time MSNBC's here or Nightline or any of these publications, anytime they're here, they say, aren't you going to cause violence? Aren't you going to? And I'm like, I'm not calling for violence. I want my taxes lowered. I want America back. I want freedom. I mean, they obsess on how, and then NBC's caught editing the Trayvon Martin audio of George Zimmerman to make it sound like he's racist. They're caught with the White House with people implanted in the protest group to hype it up. I mean, it's clear. They're the provocateurs. They're the people trying to get America fighting with themselves. They're the people calling for arresting us. These people are criminals.
And this is what's happened is across the world, we're seeing this in country after country where debate, dissent. In Australia, they rammed through these climate bills despite overwhelming opposition by the public. And then we're finding now slowly, but slowly, people are fighting back against these totalitarian tactics and streaks. We saw the same thing happen, by the way, in the U.S. Congress. Nancy Pelosi ramrodded the climate bill through, and then, of course, it went on to fail in the Senate. That was actually the birth, that and the healthcare bill were the birth of the U.S. Tea Party. Because they rammed these bills through, there were spontaneous reactions across the country, and this is when we saw global warming become support for global warming become unacceptable. Democratic senators, congressmen showing up at town halls, being booed, jeered, and laughed at when they tried to claim there was a consensus on global warming, and including Al Franken, who then said he wouldn't support the climate bill. The Democrats lost Al Franken as a supporter of the global warming bill. That's how strong grassroots action can overcome even totalitarian impulses.
And that's my next point. Are you not worried like I am? And I can't stand Barack Obama, but let's face it, Mitt Romney has supported carbon taxes, helped write the health care bills, been anti-gun. He may be singing a different tune now, but he's bought and paid for by the same crony interest.
Yes.
And just like under Bush, everybody's going to go to sleep if Mitt Romney gets in. In a way, as bad as Obama's been, he's finally gotten people to wake up.
Yes, and this is an issue that's very close to my heart. When we think of how far we've come on environmentalism and global warming, to end up with Mitt Romney is a travesty. Mitt Romney, you can look at where he stands right now. He can say whatever he wishes. He's got a book out that sounds very much like Al Gore. At one point, he was the only Republican that Al Gore praised for belief in global warming last summer. And beyond that, who is Mitt Romney surrounding himself with? People like James Connaughton, a former Bush warmist, who praised the United Nations science, praised the United Nations science process. This is a man that Mitt Romney appears to be taking in as a close advisor on global warming. It's a disaster. Warmed over Bush warmest. And who's the #1 vice presidential pick? Condi Rice. What did Condi Rice say in a recent book? She talked about how she laments the fact that George Bush didn't more aggressively pursue global warming treaties with the United Nations. This is someone the Romney campaign likes to float out like, oh, wouldn't this be an exciting name as vice president? So on these issues, in many serious respects, it's better to have a Democrat proposing them, because they're easier. Republicans will oppose it on partisan grounds. Partisanship is probably the greatest friend of liberty we have today. If John McCain had been elected in 2008, we would have global warming cap and trade if he wanted it, because Republicans won't oppose a Republican president. They will, on knee-jerk style, oppose a Democrat. And that's why, in many regards, if Obama's going to try to do anything, the Republicans will be much more aggressive in opposing it. Now, the issue now is, of course, the EPA. And that's going to have to be done through funding, through lawsuits, and or a change in administration. But the problem is Mitt Romney appears to be tepid at best on these issues.
All right, we've only got about 5-6 minutes left here, and I want to just recap the big lies they've told, what they've been caught in, the UN admitting it, Santa over there admitting it. But I wanted to bring your attention to 2 other articles. New Big Brother satellite to hunt down carbon criminals, and that's in Europe that they're going to launch this billion-dollar thing. But we already have the satellites here for years being used. I saw it in Colorado. Farmers built a barn they weren't supposed to. And then you dovetail this with human events reporting. They're shutting down areas of national parks. Most of the big public lands are shut off to humans, period, now. They're saying no horseback riding because it's bad. They're saying no boats, no fishing. I mean, right here, they really want to train us that all that federal land, that we're not allowed to touch it.
Yeah, and this is, you know, this is all part of, go back to the first Earth Summit, Agenda 21, the first George Bush. This is all sort of outgrowths of that. They're taking away nature from mankind. Humans are not considered part of nature. We're not allowed to enjoy it like the gnats, like the flies, like the mice, like the lions, like the tigers, like the bears, like the deers. We are somehow different. We're considered an invasive species, so we have to be blocked. We have to be choked out of these parks and out of these systems. And this has been happening. It's been a slow, gradual thing over the years as more and more lands are off limits to off-roading, to fishing, to hiking, to all kinds of outdoor recreation. And there's actually now, even the liberals are getting wind of this. There's actually books now about how children are separated from nature, and the only involvement they have with nature are scare videos, scare films about how it's all disappearing. So kids grow up in a complete computer-generated environment of television and handhelds and computer and different PlayStations, and they're completely devoid from nature because, and then what happens is their only involvement with nature is some environmentalists or Hollywood people scaring them about how nature is about to disappear and how nature is a, you know, some dark, foreboding secret. And what ends up happening is we're divorced from nature, and you end up caring less about those things which you're not part of. So in a way, it's a perverse environmentalism. By keeping everyone out of parks, by keeping us out of recreating in these parks, it's going to cause more environmental destruction in the end because we are no longer tied to them emotionally and physically. It's, and some of the leftists are realizing this, but you know, at the same time, this is all steam ahead with limiting human access to these parks.
Well, up on screen, we have one of the congressional maps from the mid-1990s that Dr. Kaufman put together from the UN documents. And right where they've got a spot of red south of Austin is where they've taken a bunch of property from people and forced them to sell it through adverse possession. And about half the country is completely off human limits. They've actually done these biospheres in other areas and expanded them, and these reserves. And then you've got the yellow areas that are restricted use, and then tiny green areas that where you're allowed to you know, go around and do things, about 10% of the country. I mean, this is so dangerous, and basically just turns the whole country and the whole world into a prison, and only the good little environmentalists with badges are allowed to. I was in college with a girlfriend in a place called Hamilton Pool, is where a creek comes into a cave that's fallen in. It's like a cenote. Guys, you can probably Google a photo of Hamilton Pool. And you know, I took off the day one day. It was like a Wednesday or something. And we're laying out on a little gravel beach. There's a waterfall. It's like something out of, you know, Gilligan's Island. Very beautiful. And I'm sitting there with my girlfriend, and the Nature Conservancy / Sierra Club, they all have their badges. They come in on a tour, and they walk in front of us. They all look just like the classic hippie know-it-all scientist. And they walked in front of us and looked at us like we weren't there. There was like 10 other people out there sunbathing. And they said, they shouldn't be here. My God, can you believe the invasiveness of this? Oh, and I was like, don't talk to me like I'm not here. Because this went on, where they sat there like we were animals, and because they had little pinheads, they were smarter than I am.
Yeah.
I mean, these people, it's like a religion. Well, you watch MSNBC. All they do is talk about how everyone's an idiot but them. I mean, you've got to be around them on Capitol Hill, but it's incredible, and that told me everything I needed to know. They thought humans swimming in a pool was bad. But, I mean, that thing is full of all sorts of fish, snapping turtles, you name it. They're totally, animals want to be around humans.
Well, it goes even worse, Alex. When I worked with a UK charity years ago and doing my Amazon rainforest documentary, and went down and talked to the indigenous tribes of South America. And to a tribe, every single one of them wanted a better life, lower infant mortality, and longer life expectancy and modern medicine for them and their family and their children and their babies. But if you talk to the environmentalists and the intellectual left, they would all claim that these people want to be left alone and to live as though they've lived for thousands of years in primitive huts made of dung with dirt floors and malaria and dysentery and a nasty, brutish, short life. But the reality is when you go there, they want progress, they want civilization. And here's the weird thing. This group in Europe, in UK, actually sent a bunch of college kids that were just default cultural liberals out to places in Africa and other places. Before they went on the trip, they showed them pictures of tribal people holding a cell phone, and they asked the kids what they thought of it, and the kids all thought, oh, how outrageous, Western commercialism, they're infecting these people, that's outrageous, they're ruining their way of life. And then they went there, and after they spent a couple weeks living with the indigenous people, they showed them the same picture again when they got back, and the kids understood that these aren't people like Walter Williams, the economist I interviewed for my documentary. Said they want to treat indigenous people as though they're animals in a zoo that white wealthy Westerners can come by, look at them, and say, oh, look, isn't that neat that people still live like that, and then fly home.
Exactly. They need power plants. They need medicine when their kid gets bitten by a snake. They need that stuff. And plus, if you say it's overpopulated, every study shows, whether it's a African country, whether it's a Latin country, whether it's Asian, Japan, or Europe, after industrialization, two parents start having about 1.4 children. So population goes down. The answer is industrialization if these eugenicists think there's too many people.
But it's a very similar way. They don't see humans as being part of nature, and they don't see progress as being part of tribal life. And in fact, we had one environmentalist named Gore who lamented the introduction of electricity in Africa. He talked about how people used to play the drums and be so happy. Well, he wasn't living in malaria-infested things where your children were dying and not even making it out of infancy. It just seemed like a neat concept for white wealthy Westerners with emails and fax machines and air conditioning and heating and public transit and whatever.
But like you said, I've talked to them. Once they go, and at night the clouds of stinging bugs and snakes coming into the huts, they're like, oh, whoa, now I get it. And the people are like begging for food.
It used to be called the jungle, but they turned it into a nice rainforest. And then again, to bring up James Cameron again, he and his main star of Alien, Sigourney Weaver, went down to Brazil and opposed what President Lula, again, no right-wing reactionary Lula, the president down there, Lula da Silva, he opposed him. Hollywood actors went down to oppose the Brazilian government putting in hydroelectric plants. It would bring running water and electricity progress to tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Brazilians. Instead, they went down there and said these people don't want it. They need to continue to maintain their traditional way of life.
Look, it's eugenics. It's eugenics. And some of these guys are useful idiots. But the Pentagon came out with a new report saying industrial civilization threatens the power monopoly of these megacorporations. That's it. They want to shut everybody down. In closing, what are some of the biggest lies? Al Gore creating fake video graphics of polar bears can't swim, saying they're basically all dead when their numbers have exploded, what, fivefold? Saying the Himalayas would all melt, saying that
I can't. There's 129 errors we found since ClimateGate broke, and they actually maintain that. Climate Depot features that 129 and counting of some of the main errors. You can't really say what are the big lies. The bottom line is polar bears are in danger. That's a huge lie. Mount Kilimanjaro is melting due to mankind. Two lies are contained there. A, it's not melting. B, it's not due to mankind. And it's not due to CO2 emissions. Ocean levels are rising. No, NASA's saying they're dropping. European space satellite shows they're flat or dropping the last 10 years. And Obama, by the way, takes credit for that. In 2008, he said his was going to be the presidency that sees the slowing of the rise of the oceans. Well, he did it. That's a promise kept for Obama. NASA said sea levels have not risen in 2 years.
The Himalayas were all going to melt.
The Himalayas, that just keeps getting worse and worse for them. The Himalayas are gaining ice. New studies keep coming out, just making a mockery of the United Nations on that. And I have a report on my website that I released in Durban at the last UN, at South Africa, at the last UN conference, A to Z. Not only are their predictions failing to come true, but in many cases, Mother Nature is mocking them. They have egg on their face for these predictions. And we're talking everything from ocean heat content to species extinction to, again, sea level, to the different feedback mechanisms, to all these other factors contributing to the temperature. And one of them is volcanic dust. The lack of volcanic dust alone is a third or more of the warming temperatures, of the temperatures that we've had since the 1960s. And hundreds of factors have come together to make up our global temperature. And they're trying to say it's one factor, CO2, what we exhale from our mouth. That is no longer scientifically
Well, hey, when we had a 5-year drought from Central to West Texas, which, by the way, it usually is desert and pretty arid in some of these areas, they said it was because we weren't paying Al Gore money. But then now it's been flooding, and we didn't pay Al Gore money. And the truth is, I've gone and looked at the records. It's always going through these cycles.
Yes, and the other big lies are, of course, that, oh, we've never had weather like this before. That is classic medieval witchcraft. we've never had weather like this till that witch moved in next door. We've never had weather till that neighbor bought his SUV. They actually believe this. It's sick. You have meteorologists like Jeff Masters, a global warming alarmist, who says, in my lifetime, I've never seen weather like this. In my 30 years of whatever. First of all, that's nonsense. Second of all, go back. You go to Climate Depot. I've worked with a site called Real Science. We go back to the 1870s, and we're making a mockery of all these claims about droughts and floods and unprecedented. Big tornadoes have declined dramatically since the 1970s global cooling scare. Hurricanes, we're at 30, 40-year historic lows for hurricane activities, the longest period since before the Civil War, since landfalling hurricanes have hit the United States of any significance. This is one of the biggest mockeries. You name it, they're failing miserably. And this is why people like to bring it back to where we started. This is why people like James Lovelock, who now at age 92 is walking himself back from alarm. And they're now already starting the whisper campaign. Well, he's kind of old guy, and he's that's what the warmest. They're going to now destroy this man that they revered their entire lives. Let's hope. Their mentor. They will throw him under the bus if it serves their short-term purposes. Well, Mark, let's hope they don't burn his house down, because he's now. Right. I mean, let me throw you this curveball, and then we'll let you go. And I really appreciate your time today. Amazing in-depth report. We know that the science czar 3 years ago calls for drugging the water to sterilize us, John P. Holdren, in his book Ecoscience. We know he said he wants to geoengineer the Earth to save us from global warming, and they have been doing aluminum oxide, barium salt aircraft spraying test. We know that he's called now for doing all this to save us. Bill Gates is heavily investing and doing stuff. I think they, knowing them, they could actually try to create some bad weather conditions and then say it was because we didn't pay Al Gore money. I mean, if Bill Gates is investing hundreds of millions in this, look out. And Holdren, the first press conference he gave was, he could hardly talk, but dribbling a sentence together. What do you think about that? Yeah, I don't know enough about what kind of technology they could have to have any kind of significant, lasting, or long-term effect on altering weather, and that would be interesting to see. I do know that they're openly, as we've talked about in this program, trying to alter human beings through human engineering, as Stephen Lau, the professor from SUNY New York University, wants to do. I don't know if they'll be able to do that through technology. I know this: if they could, they'll do just about anything they can to hang on to these fantasies and to their power, which is ultimately what this is about. This is ultimately about global warmers telling you we need money and we need to regulate you in order to control the weather. And that is medieval witchcraft. Well, but I mean, Obama does. He got in, and Gaia rewarded us by lowering the sea level. By lowering the sea level. And again, promise kept. He should be out there touting that. He has powers and abilities far beyond those of mortal men, if that's the case. And also, temperatures have cooled. I'm pretty sure since I have to look back because they fluctuate up and down, but I think Obama's presided over global cooling, lowering of sea level, the massive expansion of Arctic ice, expansion of Antarctic ice. Obama is nothing if not a planet healer. And I say that, of course. I've seen numbers of 3- to 5-fold increase, all-time record of polar bears invading human settlements. Yes, polar bears are through the roof since Obama's been elected. He's truly a planet healer. We need to change our tune on him. Well, it started raining a bunch when he came to Austin. Like Rick Perry prayed, it didn't work, but Obama, he just flies over rainbows, pots of gold. Hey, Marc Morano, climatedepot.com. We'll be talking to him when you're down in South Africa. Or you've already been in South Africa. You're going to be down in South America. South America, that's right. Brazil, and down to Rio, yes, the next enclave in June. So they're going to be down there saving us in Rio, too. Yeah, that'll be species. And then they're going to Qatar, the Middle East, for the next climate one in December. They just can't stop the partying. And, of course, Lord Monckton and I will be at that as well. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. All right. Thanks a lot. Wow. In-depth interview with Marc Morano, climatedepot.com. Amazing information. This is the real authoritarian threat in the 21st century. It is the big enchilada. People talk about the Muslim threat all day, and then you have Obama funding al-Qaeda to attack Libya and Syria and the rest of it. No. This is the big threat. Big government. These authoritarians who all they talk about is how they're going to savagely attack anyone that doesn't go along with them. They've got to be stopped. Let me throw this in here. These eugenicist control freaks are adding fluoride to the water that's connected to bone cancer, you name it. They are adding all these other chemicals to the water
They are engaged in all this other, type activity. You need to protect yourself. And it also supports our broadcast. We go to Infowars.com, look at the great Pro Pure water filters, and enter the promo code WATER. You get an additional 10% off the already lowest price. So please don't forget that these control freaks are adding hundreds of chemicals to the water under the name fluoride. And these filters reduce much of it down to non-detectable levels and reduce the rest of it. You can put lake water in it and drink right out of them. And it's got a side-by-side comparison at Infowars.com. On the Pro Pure filters there on the shopping cart next to the leading competitors. So I want to thank all of you for checking out Pro Pure at Infowars.com to find the widest spectrum of the products and the lowest prices with the promo code WATER. Also, don't forget here that you can subscribe to PrisonPlanet.tv, get all my films, my book, Paul Watson's book, the daily radio/TV show that's live, the nightly news, expanded extras that aren't on DVDs. 9 years plus now, since this April, 9 years and counting of PrisonPlanet.tv, or go to InfoWarsNews.com and find it there. And one membership for $5.95 a month is really 6 memberships, because you can, with your username and passcode, 6 people can log on with that. Be sure and make sure your username and passcode is not your bank username and passcode, though. Make one up when you do that, or if you haven't, change your passcode at InfoWars. News.com or PrisonPlanet.tv. And I've finally been adding some new videos to the rant section. I'd been kind of letting that lay fallow for a while, but now we're going to be in there posting a lot of new ones. Put a pretty wild one in there last week. And last time I checked, it had a nice title of some numbers. Here, let's click on it. Go ahead and click on it, because that was a little, I need to name that for folks. Okay, that is it for this edition of InfoWars Nightly News. And the good Lord willing, we'll be back tomorrow night, 7 o'clock Central, 8 o'clock Eastern at PrisonPlanet.tv. And don't forget, they'll also be on the radio, 11 a.m. Central, 12 noon Eastern. And if you don't have a local AM or FM in your area, call your local station, tell them to pick up the show. That's how we get on all these great stations, over 100 now. We're also on Global Shortwave, WWCR, listings at Infowars.com and the listen page. And then on top of that, XM channel 166. And remember, as always, this is teleprompter-free news. It's all a little noggin here. My guest and my research crew in there, so great job with the crew. I'm Alex Jones signing off. Until next time, bon voyage.